My name is Grant Imahara, and I'm one of the hosts on Discovery Channel's Mythbusters. Basically, blow things up in the name of science.
He made robots dance, blew up myths on national TV, and helped shape the tech behind your favorite blockbusters. Yet in the final years of his life, Grant was building something that could have changed many lives. But behind the smiles and robotic charm was a man carrying more than the world ever knew. What was he building in secret, just months before his sudden death? It turns out that the truth about Grant Imahara's final year isn't just sad. It's deeply personal, quietly devastating, and far more heartbreaking than anyone ever expected. From nerd to Hollywood engineer, Grant Masaru Imahara was born on October 23, 1970, in Los Angeles, California, to Japanese-American parents, and he grew up in a world where engineering met imagination. His father was an electrical engineer, and while the Imahara household was modest, it was always filled with encouragement. His mother, who saw early signs of her son's curiosity, once handed him a screwdriver when he was just 5 years old, and that one small gesture unlocked something in him. But instead of breaking toys, young Grant began to dismantle them, carefully and methodically, just to understand how they worked. Grant would later reveal that one of the defining moments of his childhood was watching Star Wars in 1977. Like millions of kids, he was dazzled by the movie. But unlike most others, he wasn't only paying attention to the storyline. He was watching the details, the moving parts, the blinking lights, and the design. This fascination with the movie stayed with him into his teens and eventually led him to the University of Southern California, where he enrolled in the electrical engineering program. However, at one point, he seriously considered abandoning engineering altogether to pursue screenwriting. The draw of Hollywood was real, but he didn't want to give up the world of circuits and systems either. That inner conflict shifted when he met Professor Tomlinson Holman, better known as Tom Holman, the mind behind the THX sound system used in Lucasfilm productions. Holman saw something rare in Grant. He saw a student who not only understood the technical side, but also appreciated its artistic possibilities. Holman mentored him, helped him bridge the gap between two worlds, and ultimately opened a door to the place that had sparked his imagination in the first place, Lucasfilm. At Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic, Grant found himself in an environment where engineering met movie magic. It was the perfect storm. He joined as a model maker and robotics expert in the late 1990s, quickly becoming one of the most respected figures behind the scenes. Grant helped design, build, and control robotic props that appeared in some of the most iconic films of the era. His credits included The Matrix Reloaded, The Matrix Revolutions, Galaxy Quest, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, Artificial Intelligence, and Van Helsing. But it was Star Wars that brought his story full circle. Grant eventually became one of only 3 people officially certified to operate R2-D2 for The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. It wasn't just a technical achievement, it was the realization of a childhood dream. But R2-D2 was never just a robot to Grant. He treated it like a character with personality. Operating it required not only remote controls and mechanics, but also a deep understanding of the subtle emotions behind each movement or sound. Grant didn't just make R2-D2 roll or spin, he made him perform. To fans, the robot was a sidekick, but to Grant, it was his responsibility. Grant simply loved and respected his job, and it showed. He treated prop design like a form of storytelling, and his machines were never lifeless. They had to do something that pushed the narrative forward. It's easy to overlook the people who make movie magic happen behind the camera, but the entire industry knew who Grant was. He was the go-to guy when you needed something to move, light up, walk, explode, or even do all 4 at once. In the world of practical effects, where machines must perform reliably take after take, Grant had a reputation for being fast and fiercely innovative. He even wrote a book on the subject titled Kickin' Bot, an illustrated guide to building combat robots, and it was published in 2003 to help hobbyists, tinkerers, and aspiring engineers master the art. It reflected his belief that the magic of robotics should be accessible. By the early 2000s, Grant had become a fixture in the world of movie effects. But unfortunately, as digital CGI began to dominate Hollywood, practical effects experts found fewer opportunities. However, rather than resist the shift, Grant started looking for new ways to bring his skills to the public, and a phone call in 2005 changed everything for Grant. The Mythbusters era. By 2005, Grant Imahara had already left his mark in Hollywood's back rooms. He was one of the few people trusted with the most iconic robots in science fiction. But that same year, he stepped into a different kind of spotlight, joining the cast of Mythbusters during its third season. The move was unexpected, even to him, and what began as a short-term gig turned into something far more significant. He became part of the build team, alongside Carrie Byron and Tori Belleci, responsible for testing myths, building contraptions, and pushing science into the realm of spectacle. Unlike his colleagues, whose energy often translated into big personalities on screen, Grant brought a quiet intensity. He didn't need to shout or perform. He simply got to work, and the audiences quickly recognized his skill not just in building things but in solving problems under pressure. While the main hosts, Adam Savage and Jamie Hyneman, took on larger cinematic myths, the build team handled their own experiments that required as much creativity as they did technical finesse. Grant became the one they could rely on when something complicated needed to move, trigger, launch, or survive impact. The show gave him visibility like never before. For years, he had been building the illusions behind the curtain. Now, he was explaining them, and doing so without ego. Viewers saw a man who didn't just know engineering but truly loved it. He lit up when talking about circuits or motion controls. Whether he was rigging a high-speed camera or building a crash test rig, he did it with a mix of calm and mastery that made the science approachable. But Grant didn't stop with Mythbusters. In 2010, he designed and built Jeff Peterson, the animatronic robot skeleton who served as the sidekick on The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. It was part gag, part marvel. Jeff was equipped with moving eyes, an expressive jaw, and a working arm, all remotely controlled by Grant. What started as a late-night joke quickly became a fan favorite. And again, Grant's work was hiding in plain sight, just behind the punchlines. His growing reputation made him something of a cult figure in the maker and robotics community, and his credibility was unmatched. He became a regular fixture at maker fairs, engineering expos, and conventions, always willing to talk shop, share knowledge, or quietly admire someone else's build. To a generation of young engineers, he wasn't just a former mythbuster. He was proof that you could turn curiosity into a career. After leaving Mythbusters in 2014, he didn't slow down. In 2016, he reunited with Byron and Belleci for Netflix's White Rabbit project, where the trio explored strange inventions, historical tech, and eccentric science experiments in a new format. The show didn't have the long run that Mythbusters enjoyed, but it captured the same spirit, blending entertainment with intellect and always staying grounded in real engineering. Grant also made time for passion projects. He joined the cast of Star Trek Continues, a fan-made web series where he played Lieutenant Sulu, a nod to both his heritage and his lifelong love of science fiction. He also appeared as a judge on BattleBots, lending his expertise in a field that had always been close to his heart. Combat robotics wasn't just a hobby for him, it was part of his DNA. Through it all, he remained consistent. And while the world came to recognize his calm voice and confident hands, very few knew the deeply personal battles and struggles he carried behind that composure. Love, setbacks, and quiet struggles. For millions of viewers, Grant Imahara was the embodiment of calm intelligence. He was a builder, a problem solver, and a quiet force on screen. But beyond the robotics, the explosions, and the experiments, there was another side to him that few people ever saw. It was quieter, more vulnerable, and in many ways far more revealing of who he truly was. At the center of that more private world was Jennifer Newman, a costume designer and actress with a vibrant creative spirit and a deep connection to Grant that lasted nearly a decade. The two had met in 2011 and quickly discovered they shared the same imaginative spark. While Grant's world was filled with code, wires, and moving parts, Jennifer brought color, texture, and performance. Together, they built a life rooted in creativity, respect, and mutual support. He proposed to her in December 2016 at her birthday party in downtown Los Angeles. The moment was thoughtful and grand, yet entirely true to who he was. He gifted her with a vintage ring valued at around $20,000. It was an Art Deco piece that, like so much of what Grant loved, blended history with craftsmanship. But it wasn't just the proposal that spoke volumes. It was the way he loved her. After his death, Jennifer would describe him as generous, kind, and endlessly sweet. She would go on to reveal that Grant always made her feel safe and that his loss felt unreal. Grant himself didn't talk much about his personal life in interviews, but those who knew him understood how central Jennifer was to his happiness. Yet while his love life gave him stability and joy, his career was undergoing a far more complicated chapter. In 2014, after nearly a decade on Mythbusters, Grant, along with fellow Build team members Carrie Byron and Tori Bellesi, was suddenly let go from the show. The announcement stunned fans. No detailed explanation was given at the time, but insiders later confirmed that the departure was tied to contract restructuring. It had not been his decision to leave, and it hit hard. For Grant, Mythbusters hadn't just been a job. It had become a platform where he could combine engineering with storytelling. It allowed him to connect with young viewers, break down complex systems, and present science as something thrilling. The show had elevated him from behind-the-scenes genius to public figure, and he had embraced that opportunity with humility and care. Being cut from the series felt like a door slamming shut that he hadn't expected. Thankfully, he bounced back quickly by reuniting with Byron and Belleki for a new Netflix series, White Rabbit Project. The concept was familiar: investigate strange topics, reenact historical oddities, and design high-tech experiments to test theories. Fans welcomed the trio back with enthusiasm, and the show developed a loyal following. But despite strong support, Netflix canceled it after just one season. That pattern of building something meaningful only to see it abruptly end became a quiet theme in Grant's professional life. He kept his frustrations private, but those close to him saw the toll it took. He was proud of his work, and rightly so. Yet there was a growing sense that he was being boxed in. People knew him only as the robot guy and the genius behind animatronics and motion rigs, and while he appreciated that recognition, it also made it harder to branch out. Grant wanted to do more than just build. He wanted to direct and explore the intersections of science, media, and representation. But the industry often has a narrow memory, and he felt the weight of that limitation. He also knew how rare it was to see someone who looked like him in his position. As a Japanese American in the STEM entertainment space, he was one of very few. Grant never turned his platform into a personal spotlight, but he did use it to advocate, especially for diversity in engineering, robotics, and science education. He believed that kids of all backgrounds deserve to see themselves reflected in roles of innovation and leadership. He volunteered his time at STEM events, judged robotics competitions, and made himself available to students who reached out. And while he didn't speak publicly about every personal hardship, there was a quiet pressure that came with being a symbol, particularly in a field where people like him were still underrepresented. Behind that steady voice and warm smile that the world knew was someone who had endured rejection, uncertainty, and the slow erosion of once secure paths. However, he handled it all with grace. Even as he stayed active in smaller projects like guest roles, public appearances, and consulting, he never stopped trying to grow. He studied more, wrote more, and reached for new formats. And in early 2020, he embarked on what would become one of the most meaningful undertakings of his life. His final project wasn't for television or film. It was for humanity, and it came just months before the unthinkable. His final project and sudden passing. By early 2020, the world was beginning to change in ways no one could have predicted. The pandemic had begun to take hold, reshaping daily life, closing borders, and plunging hospitals into crisis. But while much of the entertainment world paused, Grant Imahara kept building. And this final project was something quieter, more personal, and more purposeful. It started, like many of Grant's ideas, with a vision for something joyful. He had seen the instant cultural impact of The Mandalorian, particularly one character that had captured hearts around the world, Baby Yoda, officially known as Grogu. Children adored the character. Adults did too. But for Grant, it wasn't just about fandom. He saw in Grogu an opportunity to do something good. He began building a fully animatronic Baby Yoda from scratch, with no studio backing or corporate sponsor. It was entirely his initiative, born from a desire to bring smiles to children's hospitals during a time of isolation and fear. The goal was to bring the beloved character to life in a way that could comfort sick kids. Even during the darkest days of the pandemic, Grant reportedly handled the 3D modeling, the mechanical systems, the servo configurations, the facial movements, the wiring, and even the programming. Every joint, every blink, and every head tilt had to be calibrated to feel expressive and believable, but also gentle enough for bedside visits. He worked out of his own shop, spending late nights wiring tiny motors and troubleshooting scripts, and in collaboration with prop artisan Lauren Markland and costumer Lindsay Hamilton, he perfected the textures and finishes of Grogu's robe and skin. But it wasn't a prop. This Baby Yoda could move, respond, and emote. It was a fully functional piece of animatronics designed with the same precision he once brought to R2-D2. Only this time he wasn't building it for a blockbuster. He was building it for children who needed joy. What made the project even more extraordinary was that Grant had no obligation to do it. He didn't even announce it formally. He simply saw a need and decided to meet it with his own time, tools, and talent. It reflected something essential about who he was, a problem solver with a conscience. For Grant, engineering was never just about mechanics. It was always about meaning. Whether it was a robot in a lab or a smile on a child's face, every wire he connected was ultimately driven by something deeply human. The project was completed in the spring of 2020. Grant shared brief clips and photos on social media, giving followers a glimpse of the craftsmanship behind the character. In one clip, Baby Yoda tilts his head and looks up with wide, blinking eyes. This robot was subtle, soulful, and entirely mechanical, making it one of the most complex single-character builds he had done. Grant had big plans. Once hospitals reopened to non-essential visitors, he intended to travel with the animatronic and personally pilot Grogu to children's bedsides. No cameras, no production crews, just him, the robot, and whatever comfort it might bring to kids and families in crisis. But unfortunately, the visit never happened, because on July 13, 2020, just a few months after completing the Baby Yoda project, Grant Imahara died suddenly from a ruptured brain aneurysm. He was 49 years old. The news came without warning. Friends, collaborators, and fans were stunned. Just days earlier, he had been active, responding to messages, sharing project updates, and chatting about future plans. He had reportedly complained of headaches shortly before his collapse, but no one, including Grant, could have anticipated the severity of what was happening inside his body. Brain aneurysms are often silent until they rupture. In Grant's case, by the time he reached the hospital, it was already critical. Emergency surgery was performed, but the damage was too extensive, and he passed away shortly after. The tributes began pouring in almost immediately. His former Mythbusters co-stars expressed their heartbreak, struggling to process the suddenness of his loss. Adam Savage, who had worked alongside him both on and off camera for years, wrote, "I'm at a loss. No words. I've been part of two big families with Grant Imahara over the last 22 years. Grant was a truly brilliant engineer, artist, and performer, but also just such a generous, easygoing, and gentle person." Carrie Byron, his longtime teammate from the Build team, posted a long tribute reminiscing on their memories from the past 2 decades. Meanwhile, Tori Bellesi, who had known Grant for over a decade, called him one of the most generous and kind people he ever met, adding that Grant's death broke his heart. Even beyond the Mythbusters circle, the reaction was heartfelt. Fans, scientists, engineers, teachers, and students shared stories of how Grant had inspired them, not just to build, but to believe in their own intelligence. He wasn't just a presenter of science, he made it human. Hollywood paid tribute too. The official Star Wars Twitter account honored him for his contributions to the franchise and for bringing R2-D2 to life. Lucasfilm colleagues remembered him not only for his talent, but also for his patience and kindness. The BattleBots community, where he had been a longtime competitor and judge, went quiet with grief. In the days and weeks that followed, tributes turned into actions. Engineers posted photos of projects they completed because of Grant. Teachers incorporated Mythbusters clips into virtual lessons, roboticists built in his memory, artists drew portraits, and writers chronicled his life. He hadn't just left a body of work, he had left a ripple effect of generosity, of wonder, of quiet brilliance. And even in his sudden absence, his impact, kindness, and vision are undeniable. So is his belief that machines could be beautiful, that science could be joyful, and that the best engineers didn't just build, they uplifted. Sadly, the Baby Yoda he built sat in his workshop, fully functional, programmed to comfort, but never deployed. It would never visit those hospital rooms, never make a child smile in person. But even in stillness, it had become something more than a robot. It was Grant's last message, made of gears and servos and heart. But the heartbreak didn't end with his sudden passing. Because when Grant Imahara died, he left behind more than memories. He left behind blueprints, prototypes, and unfinished dreams. He had more to give, and the world never got to see it. The projects he never got to finish. When Grant Imahara died in July 2020, the loss rippled far beyond the world of television and entertainment. It reached classrooms, workshops, studios, and labs, places where Grant had left pieces of himself behind in blueprints, in guidance, and in half-finished ideas. He had always been building, always imagining something new. And at the time of his death, several of those visions were still in motion. Some would be carried on without him. Others, abruptly paused, would become silent testaments to what could have been. On October 23, 2020, what would have been his 50th birthday, his close friends, collaborators, and family announced the launch of the Grant Imahara STEAM Foundation. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a continuation of the work he believed in most, and that was opening doors for the next generation of scientists, engineers, artists, and creators. The foundation was created with a clear mission to provide mentorship, scholarships, and accessible resources to underserved students pursuing education in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Grant had always championed accessibility in these fields. He believed that kids shouldn't be held back by background or income. If they had curiosity, they deserved support. The foundation now works to keep that philosophy alive, funding school programs, sponsoring robotics teams, and honoring students who embody the same mix of technical brilliance and creative drive that defined Grant's own journey. But the most personal symbol of his spirit was something small, green, and wide-eyed. Though he never got the chance to bring his animatronic Baby Yoda to hospitals as planned, the robot took on a life of its own after his passing. Friends and fans began to share footage of the build online. In the comments, people from all over the world reflected on what it meant. A character built by a man who wasn't looking for recognition but for ways to comfort others during a crisis. It had been his final completed project, a robot not for film or fame but for healing. And while Grant never got to personally deliver Baby Yoda to a hospital room, the figure now represents the idea that technology, when guided by empathy, can become an instrument of joy, not destruction or profit, and it remains one of the most powerful examples of his legacy. Yet that wasn't the only high-level project Grant had in the works at the time of his death. For several years, he had been consulting with Walt Disney Imagineering, contributing to what insiders described only as a top-secret robotics initiative. Although details remain limited, due in part to the extreme confidentiality agreements surrounding Disney's research and development efforts, those who worked with him confirmed his involvement in a groundbreaking area of park technology that blurred the line between animatronics and performance. One of the innovations he had a hand in developing was the Stuntronics project, Disney's cutting-edge line of robotic stunt doubles. These autonomous acrobatic figures were designed to fly through the air, flip, pose mid-flight, and land with precision, all without human control. The technology was a leap forward in animatronic realism, and it was something Grant immediately understood not just as an engineer, but as a storyteller. He saw the narrative possibilities. What if Spider-Man didn't need a wire? What if heroes could soar across a park in real time, thrilling guests in ways they never thought possible? To Grant, this wasn't just a spectacle. It was the future of immersive entertainment. Grant understood that for something to look like magic, every gear had to disappear into seamless motion. That was the art behind his engineering, make it invisible so that others could believe. The full scope of his work with Disney remains unreleased. Much of it, sadly, may never be fully known. but colleagues there have spoken about his loss as a blow to the future of the project, not just technically but philosophically. Grant had a way of combining precision with imagination. He didn't see limitations. He saw opportunities to tell new stories, with machines that moved like dancers and robots that felt alive. His absence is still felt in those labs. Elsewhere, in the world of combat robotics, his legacy was honored in a more public but equally meaningful way. Grant had long been a central figure in the BattleBots community dating back to the early 2000s. He competed with his custom-built robot, Deadblow, which he designed and drove with characteristic calm and skill. But more than just a competitor, he became a mentor and respected voice in the sport. After his passing, the organizers of BattleBots renamed one of their most prestigious awards in his honor, calling it the Grant Imahara Best Design Award. It's now given to the team whose robot best exemplifies innovative engineering, elegance, and technical creativity, all things that Grant valued deeply. For contestants, winning this award now means something more. It means being recognized in the name of a builder who raised the bar not through flash or dominance, but through precision, humility, and brilliance. Across industries, including film, robotics, education, and live entertainment, Grant Imahara's impact is visible. His name now appears on scholarships, awards, robotics competitions, and science outreach programs, not because people feel sorry he's gone, but because they know how much more he had to give. He wasn't done. He never stopped building, never stopped mentoring, and never stopped believing that science could be a force for good. And it's not just engineers who feel it. Actors, directors, teachers, and students have all spoken about the impression he left. To them, Grant was the rare kind of person who managed to combine intellect with warmth and seriousness with joy. What's your favorite memory of Grant Imahara? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.